right. We're studying the gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and we're trying to harmonize all four of those as we go through here. Last week we were dealing with, Matthew 2, I think is where we left off. Let me go back there and check very quickly. Matthew 2 and verse 11 is where we're ready for this morning. If you're on your outline, if you still have those, that would be letter N, where it says the trip to Egypt and the death of the children of Bethlehem. So I'll tell you what, let's just back up. Actually, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. That would be letter M, actually, the visitation of the wise men. We didn't finish that one, Matthew 2, 1 through 12. I'm sorry, we'll do N this morning afterwards. Let's finish there, the two verses that are left in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12, verses 11 and 12, and we'll move on from there. It says, and when they were coming to the house, and the they here are those individuals who were on their way to Bethlehem to see the king, and of course we call them wise men, sometimes they're referred to as magi. And when they were coming to the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. Just a question before we go too far this morning. Who is the only one who is supposed to accept worship? Deity, that's right, God. And therefore, any other who tries to accept worship from man is wrong. If you remember, there was a time where one fell down at the feet of an angel, and the angel basically told him to get up, that he wasn't supposed to be worshiping him, he's supposed to worship God. Notice that the Magi fell down and worshipped him. That helps us to understand God in the flesh. Jesus was indeed the Son of God. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold and frankincense and myrrh. Now, there are three things listed there. So how many wise men were there? Very good. I don't know how many wise men there were. We're never told that in the Bible. There has been a large assumption made by people over the years that there were three wise men because there were three gifts listed, gold and frankincense and myrrh, but we don't know that. There could have been more than that. There could have been less than that. They could have come in. It could have been two of them for all I know, and they could have given three gifts. It could have been 10 of them, and they gave three gifts. I don't know. And it really doesn't matter in the end. Unfortunately, though, that happens, that people read more into the Bible than is there sometimes, and they trip themselves up by doing so. But we don't know for sure, but they did present unto him very expensive gifts, very precious gifts for that time period. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh, those things that were worthy of a king. They present these things to him, again recognizing that he was born King of the Jews, verse 2 of that very chapter. And being warned of God, verse 12, in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Remember, we'd studied last week, verse 7, then Herod, when he had privily called the wise men, inquired of them diligently what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him also. Did he really want to go worship him? If you go back to verse 3, it says, when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled and all Jerusalem with him. He was not one who was wanting really to worship Jesus and worship the King of the Jews, because he was in a position there and he didn't want to lose his power. So he wanted to know where the child was, and we'll find out here in a moment what his plans were. Anything on Matthew 2, 1 through 12, the visitation of the wise men? Yes, sir. There were some. They were not always the upright people in the world. And a lot of times power corrupts people. When you get in those positions where you have that power, some people unfortunately get corrupted by it, and they do have a history. So, and I was trying to think, well, I better hold off now. I was trying to think about the ancestry of some of those Herods, but I'll leave that alone this morning. Anything else? By the Romans, right, yes, sir. That's the case, that of course, the Roman Empire is really in control. But they did have certain ones who were of the Jews. They recognized them over the Jewish people somewhat. But at the end of the day, it was still the Roman Empire. They were the answer to them at the end of the day. Anything else? All right, let's now go to letter N on your outline, where it says the trip to Egypt and the death of the children of Bethlehem. This is where I thought we were going to start this morning, but we'll pick it up now. Someone read, if you will, Matthew 2, 13 through 18. Go right ahead.
By night and departed for Egypt. And he was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which is spoken by the Lord through his prophet, saying, out of Egypt I called my son. Then Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and all its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. Then was fulfilled what was spoken by Jeremiah the prophet, saying, A voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation, weeping, and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted, because they are no more.
All right, thank you for the reading. Let's go back, if you will, to verse 13. And when they, that's the wise men, were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream. Now, is this the first time Joseph has had any kind of appearance? We know better than that by now, right? Gabriel appeared to him when he made clear that the child that was conceived in Mary was indeed of the Holy Spirit. But this is in a dream, and the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. So that was Herod's intention. Herod was not one, I'll put it this way, if he was going to worship him, he'd change his mind very quickly if that's the case, but it doesn't seem to me that that's probably the case. Because here, before he even sends out the declaration, the angel of the Lord tells Joseph about his intention before it's even done. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. And if you're wondering about Egypt in regard to Palestine, it's a little southwest of Palestine, as you would be looking at a map. So they're going to that area. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night and departed into Egypt. Why do you think they did it by night? That's certainly a good idea. I'd be very frank with you, I don't know 100%, but that's what I would suspect is probably the case. By night, you might be able to get away without as many people knowing that you left. They may be able to travel a little easier that way with people not being knowledgeable of where they're going. And was there until the death of Herod. They waited until he passed away, and it tells us in verse 15 there was a reason for that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt have I called my son. Someone, if you will, read Hosea chapter 11, verse 1. Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1.
Israel was a child, and I loved him and called my son out of Egypt.
Thank you very much. Now, a lot of folks may say that when they originally thought that was the case, that might have been Israel coming out of Egyptian bondage years ago. But this is actually a reference here, according to Matthew 2:15, to the Lord, that he would be down in Egypt when we come out. So the direct application might have been at one time that Israel was out of Egypt from their bondage, but this applies directly to Jesus as well when he was going to come out of Egypt after the death of Herod. And please notice, have I called my son, which is a reference again to the deity of Christ, the Son of God. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth. A lot of leaders don't like it when the people go against their declarations and their wishes. And in this case, of course, we are to abide by the laws of the land and the rulers of the land, so long as they don't violate God's will. Romans chapter 13, beginning at verse 1. But there is no doubt about this. This would not have been God's will to have these children killed. So there was nothing wrong with them ignoring his decree to come back. So he was exceeding wroth and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. And the time had to do again with the birth of the King of the Jews. So basically what he's doing here, he's making sure that there's not a single one of these young boys that could possibly be the king he thinks is going to make it and live. That's what he's getting. He thinks he's going to eradicate all of them. And that would take care of the one who is to be the King of the Jews. And it takes a very wicked and cold-hearted individual to think about killing little babies 2 years old and under just so you can keep power. That's a very sad commentary on that type of individual. It tells us in verse 17, Then was fulfilled that which was spoken by, the King James Version has in the English translation, Jeremy the prophet, that is Jeremiah of the Old Testament, saying, In Ramah was there a voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning, Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted because they are not. All right, someone, if you will, let's go back to Jeremiah and see that reference. It's Jeremiah chapter 31, verse 15. Jeremiah 31, verse 15.
Jehovah says thus, A voice is heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping, Rachel weeping
Okay, thank you for the reading. In regard to Rachel, who was she? Anybody? Jacob, there you go. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the ancestral patriarchs, and Jacob was the one whose name was changed to Israel, and this was one of his wives. I say one because he had Leah as well, which was another story entirely, and the two handmaidens, which is a whole other story entirely. But nonetheless, the one that he really loved, the one he worked all those years really for, and the one he wanted all along was who? Rachel. And he really was very fond of her, and of course, when it came time for his children, he unfortunately played favorites, and he looked at the ones of Rachel very favorably. Who were the two sons of Rachel? Joseph and Benjamin, right. And they were very favorable in his eyes because they were the children of Rachel. But in regard to Rachel being mentioned here in the text, it's not a direct reference to her individually. She's long since been dead by this time. It's a reference to, again, the mother of Israel. The idea of the ancestral mother of the nation of Israel. In Ramah, there was voice heard, lamentation and weeping and great mourning. Well, why? The children of Israel being murdered. 2 years old and under are being murdered. And she's the mother, ancestral mother of Israel. And you can imagine the great mourning that was taking place by not only the people, the parents there, but it would have, if she were alive, it would have hurt her. I mean, you can only imagine that that's the case. These parents, I feel so sorry for them. They basically had to lose their children for nothing. And can you imagine someone storming into your house, taking your little newborn or 2-year-old and under, and taking that child out and killing it because of some power-hungry man? But that's what they had to go through. So yes, lamentation, weeping, great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and would not be comforted. No, they couldn't find comfort because they weren't anymore. They were gone. They were dead. The children had perished. And if you've ever lost a child, it is a terrible thing. It's a very difficult thing to experience. And I can only imagine if you were one who had already had this child for about 2 years, or even if you'd only had it for 2 weeks, there is indeed great mourning, weeping, and lamentation. All right, any question on the trip to Egypt and the death of the children of Bethlehem? All right, letter O on that outline page, page 1, this is the last one on that page. The exit from Egypt and the settling in Nazareth. Since we're still there in Matthew 2, let's pick up at Matthew 2, 19 through 23. Someone, if you will.
So when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph of Egypt, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. And he arose and took the young child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that is right in the field which was spoken by the prophet. He shall be called a Nazarene.
All right, thank you very much. Let's take a look, if you will, over at Luke chapter 2, verse 39 very quickly, since we're doing the harmonizing of these accounts. This is what Luke's account has in chapter 2, verse 39. It has, and when they had performed all things according to the law of the Lord, they returned into Galilee to their own city, Nazareth. So Nazareth is mentioned there by Luke, as well as Matthew mentioning it here in Matthew chapter 2. Again, the birth home of Jesus was Bethlehem of Judea. The childhood home where he was reared was Nazareth. And his adult home, if you want to call it that, was Capernaum, even though really he was moving around quite a bit and didn't really have a place to lay his head very often. So keep that in mind. But this is going back into the area of Galilee and to a city called Nazareth. Now, if you're not familiar with Nazareth, Nazareth was not a place that really had a great reputation. Matter of fact, the Bible will even point this out as we go forward in the life of Jesus. We'll see this later on, that there was a thought by the Jewish people that no good thing came out of Nazareth. That was the way they looked at the city, that it had a reputation that there was nothing good coming out of that city. So when they thought that Jesus, or they thought rather the one who was claiming to be the Christ, which was Jesus, came out of Nazareth, they didn't think that meant anything, because again, nothing good comes out of Nazareth. So they didn't believe that that was really the Christ. But nonetheless, let's back up verse 19. But when Herod was dead, which again, that was the whole purpose of going into Egypt, was to not return to there because of Herod. But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. Again, the Lord has his angel appear to Joseph in a dream. This is not the first time. This is not now the second time that an angel of the Lord has spoken to Joseph, saying, Arise, and take the young child and his mother, and go into the land of Israel, for they are dead which sought the young child's life. Now, Israel is not just one little city. You have to keep in mind, Israel stretched literally, if you want to think about old Israel, before it broke into the two northern and southern kingdoms, it was basically from the city of Dan, which was the northern part, to Beersheba, which was the southern part. So you would hear sometimes being referred from Dan to Beersheba. Well, that was the idea of the whole of Israel, from north to south of the land. But as they go into the city, or to this region of Israel this time, the land of Israel, they are told, For they are dead which sought the young child's life. Of course, that again is Herod. And he arose, that's Joseph, and took the young child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. Joseph is a good man. We've seen that on more than one occasion already. We see how he treated Mary when there was doubt in his mind originally to whether or not she had been promiscuous and immoral. And now we see him answering as he's done in the past with what the angel of the Lord tells him. But there is a side of him where his human side, his frailty, does shine through here in verse 23 or 22. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. He's still a man. He is no different than all of us in the sense that he had issues at times where he failed, he sinned, he doubted. He was one, unfortunately, on this occasion that let fear be something that was causing him a problem. He's already been told that he could go into Israel, for those who were dead, which sought the young child's life, were no longer there. But nonetheless, he is afraid, and he goes and he says, and he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city. This would be a city of that region of Galilee called Nazareth. Now, I want to ask you a question. Is there a difference between a Nazarene and a Nazarite? Have you heard that term before, Nazarite? What's the difference in a Nazarene and a Nazarite? Okay. Okay, most of the time when we talk about Nazarite, that's what we say, the Nazarite vow. Because that was something that an Israelite could do, and he was basically taking that upon himself for a period of time. He wasn't allowed to take anything from the grape. He wasn't allowed to cut his hair and things of that nature. Remember, Samson was a Nazarite, which that is something, again, to help you understand a little bit of him. But there is a difference between one who took a Nazarite vow and one who was a Nazarene. Jesus was not a Nazarite. He was a Nazarene. So those images you see of Jesus with the long flowing locks and of hair and everything, you might as well get that out of your head. That wasn't our Lord. That has been romanticized, and that has been put into the thoughts of men by those who painted images long after Jesus was gone on this earth. He was not a Nazarite by that sense. He would not have had that long flowing hair. He would have been one who would have been a faithful Jewish young man who would have had his hair more or less like a lot of the Jewish men would have had at that time period. It would not have been long flowing, effeminate looking hair. But that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. Not a Nazarite, a Nazarene. He would come from the city of Nazareth. And if you want to go back, and let's take a look real quick. Let me go take a look, make sure of something before I say it out loud. See which one we want to do here. All right, let's see here. All right, no, that's not what I want. All right, we'll leave that for now then. Let's move forward. Anything else on the exit from Egypt and the settling of Nazareth from Matthew 2, 19 through 23 and Luke 2, 39? Nope? All right, let's move forward then. We have a new outline this morning. If I could get a couple of men who would help me with this, I would appreciate it. I do apologize to you on the front end because our copy machine needs some toner apparently, and these are not very good looking. Neither are the sermon outlines this morning, but maybe you can see them well enough. Thank you, sir. This continues where we left off, so if you're keeping these outlines, this is moving on in letter or Roman numeral I or 1, I guess would be more appropriate. Number 1, the first topic, the time before Christ's earthly ministry. It's continued here on page 2 with letter P in the outline order. The life in Nazareth and a trip to Jerusalem when Jesus was 12 years old. I'll give more time for them to get these passed out. That is going to be found in Luke chapter 2, verses 40 through 52, if you'd like to be opening there. Luke 2, 40 through 52. Again, this is still the time before Christ's earthly ministry that we're studying here. And we're using Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John's accounts to help us to see what was going on during that time period and harmonizing it as we move along together. This time we take Luke's account, Luke 2, 40 through 52. I appreciate Jim and Scott passing those out. Is there anyone else who needs one? Okay, he's coming your way. He's coming your way. All right, let's get ready for Luke 2, verses 40 through 52. Is that everybody has one now? All right, who will read that for us? No. Nobody wants to read? You got it right? Okay.
And the child grew and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem, after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem. Joseph and his mother knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company on a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinfolk and acquaintances. And when they found him not, they turned back again to Jerusalem, seeking him. It came to pass that after 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors, of hearing them and asking them questions. All that heard of him were astonished at his understanding and answers. And when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said unto him, Son, why hast thou thus dealt with us? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sore. And he said unto them, How is it that ye sought me? Wish ye not that I must be about my father's business? And they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. He went down with them into Nazareth, and was subject unto them. But his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. And Jesus increased in wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man.
All right, thank you very much. Back to verse 40. And the child grew, that is Jesus, and waxed strong in spirit, filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. Now, at this stage in his life, he's still a young boy. He's not even technically at the age of a teenager yet. But as he's growing, he is learning and he is developing. And you notice, again, the favor of God, or that's the grace of God, is upon him. He's strong in spirit. He has this young boy was... He would have been boy, don't get me wrong, but he also was one that was a special one. And the idea, we're going to find out how special in a few moments when he was in the temple there. Now, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the Feast of the Passover. Were they supposed to do that? Yes, they were. That was part of what the old law required, was them to go to the city of Jerusalem for that very thing. So the parents were going like it was normally done. And guess what? Jesus, being the son of Mary and the adoptive son, if you want to use that terminology, or stepson of Joseph. And when he was 12 years old, they went up to Jerusalem after the custom of the feast. And when they had fulfilled the days, as they returned, the child Jesus tarried behind in Jerusalem. I'll stop there for a moment. Jesus, being a good child, goes along with them. He's going up to the city for this feast of the Passover. But when that is over with and they're ready to leave and go back home, Jesus didn't go with them. I want to ask you all a question this morning. Y'all ever been in Walmart, a mall, Kmart, grocery store? You turn around for a second, there's your little one. You turn around another second, where did he or she go? You ever had that happen? I wonder how they felt. He's 12 years old. He's not even a teenager technically yet. And all of a sudden, he's no longer in their company. And Joseph and his mother, though, at this point, knew not of it. But they, supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey. They thought he would be there. Keep in mind, there's going to be a large group of people traveling. It wasn't just Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. That wasn't the only three. So this is a big group of people who would be traveling, and as you can imagine, a larger crowd, you're not necessarily fixated all the time on one person. And they thinking that he's probably just with somebody. Maybe he had some friends, maybe he had some family, whatever the case may be. They just think he's there somewhere in the company, that he's there somewhere. They don't have any reason at this point to doubt that he's stayed behind. But nonetheless, they supposing him to have been in the company, went a day's journey, and they sought him among their kinsfolk and acquaintance. So they thought the same thing. Well, maybe he's out there with a friend, or maybe he's out there with some family, and we'll go look and we'll find him. But they don't find him. Now, when you're a mother, we've husbands and fathers, we might not tell you this, but it might do the same to us too. When that child doesn't appear and you can't find them, your heart drops to your stomach, and you feel like you're just going to almost be sick. And when they found him not, they turned again to Jerusalem, seeking him, just like any good parents would. If you can't find your child, you're going to do just about anything you can to locate your child, and that's what they're doing here. And it came to pass that after 3 days, how many of you mamas would have been just absolutely nerve-wracked by then? 3 days they found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the doctors. That's the doctors of the law. That is not physicians the way we think of doctors today. These would be like lawyers or of the old law, the law of Moses. Sitting in the midst of the doctors, both hearing them and asking them questions. Now, the hearing them might not have been that strange. There might have been a lot of people that sat around and listened to the doctors of the law, but a 12-year-old boy most of the time probably wasn't asking them a lot of questions. But not Jesus. This is a very special young man. And all that heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. He's able to discuss things with them that probably a lot of adult Israelite men weren't able to do as well as he did. Well, obviously, being God in the flesh, he would handle it perfectly. But nonetheless, he had been growing in spirit, filled with wisdom. The grace of God was upon him, verse 40. So when the time comes, he's in the temple in Jerusalem, and these doctors of the law are around him, or he's around them. He's able to ask them questions. He's able to speak to them on a level that is far above maybe what most would expect him to be able to do. All that heard him were astonished, and when they saw him, they were amazed. That's his mom and daddy. And I say daddy, obviously we mean a top-tip or stepfather again, but I hope you understand when I say that. Obviously, I'm not taking away the fact that Joseph's not his physical father. But they saw him, they were amazed. You have to kind of look at it from an interesting perspective. Here's Mary, here's Joseph. Both of them have been told about Jesus, about his future. They know those things have been already revealed to them. But they're still dealing with a 12-year-old boy that they've been rearing for 12 years that you can imagine that's their boy. And here he is, 3 days they've had to wait and looking around for him. And when they come in there, not only do they find him fine, that they're grateful for that, but they're amazed at how he's able to talk with these doctors of the law and deal with them. Maybe a little reminder to them of who he was. Maybe a little wake-up call that, yes, this is our 12-year-old son. We've been missing him, and we were uneasy for 3 days looking for him. Maybe we need to be reminded of who he is and what he's doing, that this is something special, and we need to understand that. And his mother said unto him, Son, why hast thou dealt thus with us? How many of you mamas, first thing you say, why did you do that? What are you thinking? You had your daddy and me just worried to death. Sound about right? Why hast thou dealt thus with us? In other words, why did you do this? Behold, thy father and I have sought thee sorrowing. Absolutely, 3 days' worth. And he said unto them, and again, here's that wake-up call. This is not just an ordinary 12-year-old boy in and of itself all the time. This is different. And he said unto them, how is it that ye sought me? In other words, Jesus is basically turning it back. He's not doing this insultingly. He's not doing this with an ugly tone. But he's turning this back around to Mary in a way that makes her think about, again, who he is and what he's supposed to be doing. How is it that ye sought me? Wist ye, that just means, know ye not that I must be about my Father's business. That's what the King James Version has. If the American Standard Version, if you'll read that for us, will you read that for us, Brother Vincent, in Luke chapter 2, verse 49? It's different in the American Standard Version.
Said unto them, how is it that you sought me? Ye not that I must be in my Father's house.
There it is. Thank you, sir. Different, isn't it? I must be in my Father's house. Where?
Mine says he was a little teacher also to the doctor.
And that's the idea. They're teachers of the law. That's what it means. Again, the doctors today for us is a different term, the way we look at it. But that is exactly right. They would have been teachers of the old law. But the idea here, when the King James Version it says, "Well, and wist or know ye not that I must be about my Father's business," the American Standard has it translated a little more better, or a little more accurately. The idea again that he was in his Father's house. Where was the presence of God supposed to be with the children of Israel? In the temple. Under the old law, it was in the temple. So he's in that sense, my Father's house. He's 12 years old. His physical father and physical mother are seeking him 3 days. They're upset. They're sorrowing. They may need a reminder of who he is. They come to him. Mary, as a mother does, rebukes him. He reminds her, though, I must be in my Father's house. My Father's house. Think about what he just said to them. His physical earthly father, Joseph, his physical earthly mother, Mary, but who's his real father? He has a job to do.
You know, it appears though his mother and dad didn't really understand what he was.
I think at this point that may be a part of it. They had been 12 years rearing this boy, and in 12 years you're dealing with a child just like you would any parent. And maybe some things, I don't know if it slipped their mind completely, but maybe they weren't thinking on it the way they should. And when Jesus says this, that ought to have been a reminder of who he is. And they should have been understanding what the issue was. He has more important things to do. And this is just at 12 years old. By the way, in verse 49, those are the first recorded words of Jesus in the Bible. Those are his first words that you find in the Bible. And it has to do about being in the Father's house, doing the work that he's supposed to be doing. From the very outset of what you see him saying, he's about his Father's business or in his Father's house. He would continue that, and he would be that way until the day he died. Because on the day he died, he said 3 words, "It is finished." He did all that he was supposed to do, exactly the way the Father wanted it done. He fulfilled the old law of Moses. It is finished. All right, and they understood not the saying which he spake unto them. That goes back to what Vincent was saying. They don't fully understand. Maybe this is a little bit of a reminder. Maybe they needed a wake-up call, but they don't fully get it apparently here. They still don't fully understand what he means by that. But here we're going to find out Jesus being a 12-year-old son. I want you to notice he does go back home with his mother and his adoptive father. He's not trying to be ugly to them. He's not trying to do wrong by them. He's not trying to be a rebellious child, as some people might want to try to make him sound. And he went down with them and came to Nazareth and was subject unto them. He was a good boy. The idea of being subject to them, he minded them. I don't think he did this at all to show his parents up. I don't think he did this at all to cause them any sorrow. I think he took an opportunity and he was trying to do that which was good, going in there and talking to these doctors or teachers of the law. And obviously it's amazing the ones who heard him and were astonished who'd heard him. And then we come down, but his mother kept all these sayings in her heart. You have to be a little bit amazed sometimes at Mary. I mean, you're talking about a woman who gave birth to deity. I know that sounds wrong, but it's true. She gave birth to God in the flesh. And again, he was Son of Man too. He was 100% man, but he was also 100% God. Keeping these things in her heart, I mean, it's got to be difficult for a woman to deal with that balance of he's a child, but he's the Son of God. He's the child, but he's the Son of God. That would be a hard thing sometimes maybe to keep in balance.
Or you have to think there's a little bit of time to change gears. I couldn't find. There's a lot of hysteria. He's at the right age to be a slave for somebody.
He could be, yes.
Grabbed up off in a caravan going to Timbuktu or wherever. And he wasn't being a smart aleck here.
No, not at all.
Because it says, why is it that you're seeking me?
Right, absolutely.
Did you not know it's essential for me to be in the things of my Father? The point being, this is a guileless child, a pure child, and he is teaching the elders.
And that's an amazing thing. A 12-year-old teaching these ones who are supposed to be the experts. And he's able to sit and talk with them just as if he's an equal, not even an equal, even more so. At 12 years of age, you're right. And keep in mind, we go through all of this, even at this time. What is most of the time that a lot of times our young folks start thinking about obeying the gospel? Somewhere around that age or becoming a teenager, something along those lines. Why? because they began to recognize sin and what it is. Correct? Jesus never had to worry about that. Do you ever think about that aspect of it? He never sinned. He never had to worry about that. Go ahead.
That's one thing about Jesus.
Absolutely.
Not trying to reflect on the family of Jesus here, Joseph and Mary, but I think it's a good example today too for the religious world. They looked for Jesus, but they couldn't find him. They went to the families. No, they didn't find Jesus in the family, but they did find him back where he was, and they did find him. And so that's what people do today. They're looking in the wrong place.
That's exactly right.
They need to look to God and look knowing that he's there. It might not be in your family,
That's right.
but he is there.
He needs to get up and preach that, doesn't he? That sounds pretty good. Sound like a preacher. Of course, Brother Jerry has preached many, many, many times. He's been preaching for years.
Those
And
people he was teaching would also ask that, young man, where's your parents?
well, and you probably would have individuals who, not, it says with the astonished and the amazed part, obviously his parents were, and as other people who heard him were astonished. That would have been something too, probably. They would have really wanted to know, where are your parents at? Why are you in here? I mean, this is not normal. This is not the way the normal routine would have been in the temple during that time period. I hate to have to stop there at verse 52, but we're going to for today. We're a little over, but I say we're a little over. We're actually about right on it. I think it must have come in a little early. We'll pick up there next week, Lord willing, at verse 52 and finish off that segment of Scriptures. Hope you're enjoying the harmonizing of the gospel accounts.